Which choice best describes data in the graph? Let's support the researcher's conclusion. Jiahu and colleagues hypothesize that workplace leaders who reflect on lessons learned from past mistakes are likely to exhibit more humility than leaders who don't engage in such reflection. To test this, the team placed 301 managers in one of three groups. Participants in two experimental groups were asked to reflect on a mistake, one group focusing on a mistake that resulted in learning, and the other group for focusing on a mistake that didn't result in learning. Participants in a control group were asked to reflect on their daily routine. All the participants then described how they would respond to a workplace scenario. After evaluating the responses for evidence of humility, the researchers concluded that their hypothesis was correct. So looking at this graph here, we can see that it highlights the humility scores for participants in scenario responses. And there are three different scenarios: mistakes with learning, mistakes without learning, and control. This y-axis highlights the average humility score, where the higher the values, the more humility shown. And from this graph, you can clearly see that the mistakes with learning showed a higher average humility with about 3.1 average humility score. Mistakes without learning scored the lowest average humility with about a 2.6 humility score, and the control group scored in between these two with a roughly 2.7 or 8 humility score. So let's look at the answer choices. Option choice A says none of the three groups' average humility score exceeded 3.5. This is incorrect because this does not support the researcher's conclusion. The conclusion was that that participants, what is it here? It highlights that the workplace leaders who made mistakes with learning had a higher average humility score than those that made a mistake without learning. So the fact that none of the three groups' average humility scores exceeded 3.5 doesn't support this conclusion. It just shows a data point, or reflection of this graph. So A is incorrect. B. The managers in the control group exhibited only slightly less humility on average than the managers in the two experimental groups did. This is incorrect because although the control group did experience a slightly less humility score on average than those with mistakes with learning, they didn't do the same for those with mistakes without learning. Therefore, this does not properly match the data in the graph, so B is incorrect. C. The managers who reflected on a past mistake that resulted in learning exhibited more humility on average than the managers in the other two groups did. This seems to be the correct answer because this properly reflects the table and supports the researcher's conclusion. Option choice C highlights how those that reflected on a mistake with learning exhibited more humility on average than the other two groups did, the ones without learning and the control group. And this supports the conclusion where it highlights how the workplace leaders who reflected on lessons learned from past mistakes are likely to exhibit more humility than leaders who don't engage in such reflection. Therefore, C seems to be the correct answer. D. All three groups exhibited less humility on average than the researchers expected. This is incorrect because nothing in the text highlights how or to what level the researchers expected the groups to show humility. So because this is not highlighted in the text, D is incorrect. And the correct answer is C.